In this video, we're going to take a look at events and how to handle events when they happen. So the ones in particular, we're going to do one of these examples, but lots of events can happen in these applications. And there's keyboard events and there's mouse events. We're going to talk about mouse events. You can look up keyboard events to see how they work. But there's different events that can happen. We can have an event that happens when the mouse gets clicked. We can have a different event that happens if a mouse gets dragged. If a mouse enters over a certain node, we can detect that. If it exits from a certain node, if it moves it, if the mouse is pressed while it's on a certain node, or if the mouse is released from a certain node. So a lot of times people think events should run when somebody clicks on it, and that means they pressed it, right? But the problem with that is sometimes people accidentally click on the wrong thing. So it's almost always better to do released. That way, if they click on the wrong thing, they can slide their mouse off and then release it. So we're going to look at set on mouse released for this example, but you can experiment with all of these. So let's set something to run with Duke. So the first thing I'm going to do, so I have this Duke image node, and I want to say that I want something to happen when somebody clicks on it. So I can do something like this: Duke image. That's the name of that's the name of the image node, and I can say that when somebody releases the mouse. So I'm going to do set on mouse release. And inside the parentheses here, I have to give it some code to tell what should happen when somebody releases the mouse. So they had to have clicked and then released the mouse while they're touching this image. So how are we going to handle that? Now, I showed code earlier when we first started the default project. When we create a JavaFX project, it has a click event in there. And it's kind of a clunky looking one. I'm going to show you how to do a click event using Lambda expressions. It's really easy. And it's a little bit easier to read than using the anonymous inner classes, like in that previous example. We really didn't go into a lot of detail on that because this is probably the way you're probably going to do it because it's a lot easier to read. So what do we need to do? In between these two parentheses, we have to include something called a Lambda expression. It's a function that runs. And basically, we're going to start out with some parentheses. And we're going to talk about, we can pass in a parameter here. So the parameter I'm going to use is mouse event. And I'm going to name it ME. So if somebody passes in, when somebody clicks, or releases the click in this case, it's going to generate a mouse event. And we're calling it ME for short for mouse event, not for me personally. So I'm using the variable ME. So when they release it, it's going to generate a mouse event. And when that mouse event happens, we want to tell it what to do. And to do that, I'm going to use a little arrow. It's a dash followed by a greater than sign. And then we can use, just like we would for any other function. So it's kind of an abbreviated way or an easier way to write a function or a method. So this is the parameter. So when somebody releases the mouse, we're going to accept from the system. It's going to pass us the mouse event. And then we can do something with that mouse event. But for this, we're just going to do something simple. Somebody releases the mouse when they're on Duke's image. In here, between these two braces, we can write some code. And I'm just going to have it print out that tickles. Okay. And that's it. That's an event handler for when somebody releases a mouse while they're touching that picture of Duke. Now, there's some things that had to be imported here. So let's go back up here and look. Mouse event had to be imported. And I had previously done this one so it was already there. If you're doing it initially, it might look like that. And then you come over here to the arrow and say, hey, here's another one of those cases. We want to make sure it's the mouse event from JavaFX. And that's not the first choice, it's the second choice. Okay, so mouse event had to be imported there. All right, so let's go ahead and run this now. And there's Duke, and when I click on it, we don't see anything. If I pull up the output window here, let's pull Duke back up and click on him, and you can see that it's printing out that tickles, and we could write whatever code in there we wanted to make our application work. So that is a click event. Actually, it's an on-mouse released event. You can do events for any of those things. Look up keyboard events if you want to write some for keyboard events. And this is the Lambda expression that gets passed the click event into this variable, which we didn't actually use in this, but you should track it anyway. And in between the braces, we can write whatever code we want.